right, everybody, let's go. We're back once again. We're cranking them out like rapid fire here. Laying it down with Big D. I, of course, am your host, Andrew Big D Morrow. Today I've got a fellow content creator, a fellow Counter-Strike enthusiast here, my boy Jack. You know him as Lionheartz on YouTube. Jack, how are we doing today? My God, my chins.
I'm doing great, Big D. It's great to be here, laying it down, making more podcast experiences. Now I'm kind of putting my name out there. You know, we just got done making some Roster Mania news over on my YouTube channel, Lionheartz CS2, and now we're here to talk about more Counter-Strike. It's all I do day in and day out, and there's always more stuff to talk about.
Yes, well, let's before we get too much into the nitty gritty of various opinions and thoughts on the current happenings around the scene. Let's learn about the man behind the channel. Take us back. How far? What are your earliest memories of video games, and how did you land on Counter-Strike eventually?
Oh boy, earliest memories of gaming. Okay, so I mean, obviously I've been playing games most of my life. I really never got into multiplayer video games until much later, like middle school, high school. I'm 26 years old. And that's just because, at least growing up, my parents didn't really like let us have like Xbox Live or anything like that. So I never got to play like, kind of the golden era of Call of Duty. Didn't really play PC games at all until I really kind of jumped in heads first. I was like 12, 13 years old, started playing like free to play games, and then got into Counter-Strike. I got into CSGO pretty early on into CSGO's lifespan, around like 2013, like just before the skins update, and then played CS all through high school. I really only stepped away from playing Counter-Strike in like 2017 and 18 when just kind of interests were taking me to different spots. I've always been very much a casual gamer. I've never played professionally in any esports. Never really even played like high-level pugs or anything. I'm very much just the average fan of the game, but fell in love with esports, watching pro Counter-Strike, the golden era of CSGO and everything. I've always been an analytical person. I've always loved to kind of break things down. Always loved sports. Always loved analyzing sports. So when it came to CS2 came out, I was already jumping around making YouTube videos in a bunch of different spaces. I'd worked in Valorant during the beta. It was just like, it was time to return. Counter-Strike was always like home for me. It was always the game I played the most of out of any other game. And other things weren't working in other games. It was time for a change. And it was like, CS2 is here. It's new. It's time to just jump in and get back into the scene.
You're darn tootin'. So you've been doing this since the beginning of Counter-Strike 2?
Yes. Pretty much as soon as the beta came out, as soon as I got into the beta, rather, I was streaming and playing. And then at first I was just making like stream highlights. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't really like get to where I'm at, where I'm making all the recaps and talking about the pro stuff until a little bit later on. And that just kind of came out of just shifting interests. When I worked in Valorant, I worked for YouTube channels, and that's what I did, was I analyzed pro games during the beta period in like the first year and a half of Valorant. I always kind of had the mind for it. I just wasn't sure if I was going to jump over, because kind of breaking into like CS2 analysis is kind of a daunting prospect, because it's a very much like a very like, I guess, hierarchical situation where the analysts are very set in stone. They're all people who've been around the scene for a lot longer than I have, and most of them are ex-players. So being just kind of a voice with no credibility behind it and talking about the game, that's a hard space to break into, to get people to understand that, your eye test of the game is correct. The takes that you're making are correct and worth listening to. So that was a very daunting prospect, but I was always good at yapping. I was always good at having strong opinions, so I just kind of kept doing it.
I like that. Yeah, well, and as we learned on our episode yesterday, because of at the time of record, they don't need to know all that Lionheartz. I'm gonna tell it like it is, though. Here we had Nard out here on yesterday, and I mean that he said the highest he ever made it competitively was making it to like a main team back in the day, and he knew he was never gonna. And now all of his strats are used through content creation at the highest levels of Counter-Strike. So you're like, content creation is another avenue of showcasing your value to a team in the game of Counter-Strike at a professional level, especially because you're not going to have open or IM or usually even main teams, unless they've been around the block for a while and are a high level main team, asking for analysis or, coaches at that level. But higher levels are. So the path you're on is definitely still attributing to a high level of Counter-Strike. Don't sell yourself
Hmm.
short, is what I'm saying.
Oh, for sure. I just mean from the perspective of I've never done it, right? I've never played high level pugs or anything like that. My experience playing Counter Strike is very much the casual level. I've just always been someone who, when I do play, I've always been kind of the in game leader, the shot caller, the person who wants to direct because I hate playing without direction myself. There's nothing worse to me than playing a random game and nobody's talking and nobody's doing anything and we're just kind of playing picks every round. I think that's just like the most miserable way to play the game. I've always had the mindset for the game. I've always been able to read the game at a higher level. It's just my aim is not that good. Never been good at clicking heads.
It's tough, dude. I don't care how much DMing I do, how much anything I do. I get stressed out too easy and my aim goes out the
Hmm.
window in every single pug. It's even worse in league matches. Well, yeah, that answers my question about how you got into content creation then. I mean, let's dive into some opinions about North American
I
Counter-Strike.
got
What do
many
you
of them.
say?
So
I
I went pretty viral on Twitter during the major. I had a pretty prolific crash out about opping in North American Counter Strike. It was after Liquid got bounced out by Mouse and Ultimate dropped that 50 bomb and Liquid still couldn't convert the win. I was pretty tilted at the time, so like I've settled down. My opinion's a little more neutral than what I was putting out on Twitter. Um, I think it's very weird to me from the outside looking in that North America has continually had two major issues. One, we don't develop new in-game leaders, and two, we can't seem to develop oppers who can play internationally at all anymore. Like Skadoodle was like the peak, and that was almost 10 years ago. And nobody since then that's been a new prospect has made the jump internationally in any way that's been sustainable or shown to be close to being a top 15, top 10 opping level. It confuses me. I don't understand why we haven't been able to make oppers that can compete when I look at opping as a very selfish, egocentric, like you are the guy. The op is the most intensive resources, it's the highest impact weapon in the game. And NA is all about ego. NA is notoriously about ego and me, and I'm gonna be the guy. But we don't produce oppers. I don't really understand it.
That's actually a really good point. Yeah, the opera is one of those like star roles that you hear talked about a lot in this region, and you would think that there's a lot more people eager to like step up to that. So yeah, I think there's a case study to be done. Why doesn't NA have better oppers that can play internationally? My dog's insistent on being in front of the camera, so now you're laying it down with Garcon
Mm-hmm.
over there. That's going to be on the video. You still just see me here, but the people at home, he's right up there in front of the
He's
camera.
big chillin'.
So, uh, he's big chilling, dude. That's all we do, big chilling. We got the cat and the dog up here. We're all laying it down. And yeah, why can't we get more oppers? Because oppers are not egocentric maniacs, but you would think that like with exactly what you said. I don't need to repeat
Mm-hmm.
it. I'm trying to like rack my brain here as to why that is, because I don't know. I'll say why it is. I think it goes back. I'm sure there are plenty of oppers lurking out there that are waiting for their shot to perform on a big stage. We've been cycling through the same kind of tier 2 talent and like not developing new talent for a while in this
Mm-hmm.
region though. And a lot of that comes from Valorant 5 years ago, right? Like a lot of the young up and comers left to go play Valorant. So there's that part of things. But it just often feels like in our region we don't have a lot of these tier, like why don't Complexity and uh Wildcard and Liquid have like academy rosters that are in ECL or advanced even?
Mm.
Like why aren't we cycling
Yeah,
upwards?
I do think there's a couple of problems kind of downstream of that. I think obviously the big thing, the money is obviously always going to be an issue. NA just doesn't have the same kind of money it did, doesn't have the same infrastructure it did 5 years ago. So that definitely puts a barrier to entry to begin with. But I think even before that, I kind of want to circle back a little bit to what you just said about Valorant. I personally disagree that Valorant has been this big, sustaining kind of like brain drain of talent for CS. I'm just going to lay this down. I think this is absolutely true. We have not lost significant talent to Valorant. I just fundamentally don't believe that. The NA Valorant players who were ex-CS players were all players who could not kick it at the highest level of CS to begin with. Wardell, Tens, these guys were players who tried to break through into Tier 1 in NA and could not do it. So I don't think it's necessarily an issue of like losing those guys as some big deal for like the longevity of North America. It's more so that we lost the infrastructure. We lost, there's no NA Pro League anymore. ESEA has, gone down a lot. We don't have MDL really as much anymore. We lost a lot of the NA league play that would be this big showcase for tier 3, tier 2, tier 1.5 talents. And then if you're the top teams, if you're Complexity, Liquid, or whatever, you had to look EU during the pandemic, especially because you wanted to play the best teams. You couldn't do it in North America because everyone else is in Europe. So it's like we stretched ourselves so thin that the talent got spread out. And then maybe we lost some younger players who are like 15, 16, 17-year-old Valorant, but I don't necessarily think that means we lost everybody. We just don't have that vehicle upwards to bring those talents to the forefront, like you were saying. And then most of all, if you are a young player right now and you're listening to this and you're trying to make your come up in the pro scene, dude, focus on being an in-game leader if you don't think you're good enough to be a rifler. And if you think you're good enough to be a star, pick up the fucking op. There is room for you. There is room. Pick up the sniper rifle and make it your weapon. There's absolutely room for people to be doing that. I just don't think we have the players who are willing to put themselves out there and make that happen yet, because we're still kind of like building the scene back up.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we are still building the scene back up, but I do feel like we're on an upward tick. I think that, yeah, once we start getting a few more people that are playing like clearly defined roles and teams are being built upon that. I also think that like the shakeup of VRS right now in this region has like I've been seeing a lot more of like what it looks like from a tournament organizer perspective, working with like OSS and Fragadelphia this year and like getting to talk to those guys about VRS. The way that VRS is reshaping things, you and I were talking about this for a moment off stream as well. There are more lands and more tournaments coming to North America as well, which means that we're gonna get more teams that are practicing, and like the weird like pyramid pipeline of ESEA leagues is no longer going to be the only route to like making a name for yourself in a region anymore. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's going to be the path forward. Is there's going to be more opportunities for players to make the name for themselves. One thing that I think is kind of interesting to think about, and I'd be curious to get your perspective on this, because this is where I would have next to no knowledge about it. In EU, you see players get noticed in FPL like all the time. Like you hear about, these kids in EU, they're like 17 in FPL frying some of the best players in the world, in pugs. But NA FPL has a pretty notoriously bad reputation compared to EU. So I gotta wonder if there's also a cultural thing still with NA, where I really feel like a lot of us just don't take the game seriously enough. And I think that compared to EU, like EU looks at FPL as this is my chance to get to a team and make my career. Like I'm playing FPL, become a pro Counter-Strike player. I think there are a bunch of NA people who play FPL just to kind of play, just to like pug, just to have fun. Like I don't think we have that like. The big thing that differentiates NA from EU culturally is that I don't think we have people who take Counter-Strike seriously from the beginning of, this is a sport, I am doing this to become a professional athlete, I want to be the very best from day one. We have players who I think are very good, get to FPL, and then they're just kind of content fucking around.
Yeah, I think that you that's exactly right. Everybody that I talk to that plays FPL, I mean, everybody takes it seriously, right? Like they're not just going in there trolling off and having fun, but it's a cultural issue of like, we don't take it as seriously. Like there's still like video games are more culturally accepted now than when I was like when I graduated high school in 2008. So mid 2000s was when video game consoles were like becoming really popular and starting to become mainstream. But like I still grew up in a time period where video games were the nerdy thing to do, and that's starting to change, right? Like you have more young people playing in these various games. But the problem is Counter-Strike culturally isn't also accepted at like a high school or middle school level, because here in America, oh, it's the terrorists versus the
Yep.
counter-terrorists, and we
Yes.
can't have that in these schools, right? So a lot of times the competition for Counter-Strike in our region isn't starting until a college level, where, people are just coordinating what they want to do instead of being told what they can or can't do at school. But you still like have that cultural shift starting to happen, but it's still taking time for it to be like cool to want to be an esports athlete when you're a kid,
Yes.
right? Like, especially when being an esports athlete in our region, especially, is a big gamble to like try to invest all your resources in, when you need to still be studying and getting a job and whatever else comes with that here in our culture,
Yep.
right?
No, I think that's absolutely a huge point. Not to get on my socio-political fucking soapbox for a second, but North America is unfortunately still pretty puritanical, pretty conservative when it comes to these things. Like, a lot of the reasons I didn't get to play like multiplayer shooter games growing up because my mom thought that would turn me into a school shooter. She thought video games made you violent, and a lot of people still think that for whatever reason, despite all available evidence. In Europe, they just don't care as much. LAN cafes, PC cafe culture is so much bigger in other areas of the world, whereas that never really took off in the same way in the US, which is kind of bizarre to me because arcade culture in the 90s and the 2000s was a huge deal. That was a huge cultural touchstone, was going to the arcade, playing air hockey, and getting tickets and getting shitty toys that you forgot about in 5 minutes afterwards. But like the arcade to PC cafe transition did not really happen in the US in the same way. It happened in pockets, like in California and like some areas of like on the East Coast as well, and some parts of Oregon, PC cafe culture was kind of a thing, but it died out. We don't have it in the same way. We don't have stories like 910 in Mongolia taking the train 2 hours to play PC cafe lands for enough money to be able to take the train home at the end of the day, and then 2 years later he's playing in a major grand finals against Vitality. We don't have that, so we don't have good access from the very beginning. I think that's really hurting us in the long run.
Yeah, I think we are starting to see the rise of LAN cafes again, though. Like, I think something that, because yeah, that started to happen in the early 2000s. I remember that's how I was introduced to Counter-Strike originally, was at the little tiny LAN cafe, or one of the earliest introductions of it. I don't remember if it was the first, but little tiny LAN cafe in my tiny town in Oregon was, open for a couple of years, and then eventually had to merger with the pool hall, and then it eventually all closed down because it wasn't sustainable. Everybody's at home playing Xbox Live or playing on their PC online at home.
Mm-hmm.
But what we've missed out over the last 20 years of not having these places is the community that you build. You go to LAN and you see the community. It doesn't matter how, I talk about this all the time on the show. Every single person on Counter-Strike, save for a few exceptions, in a pug at some point in their career, has been an absolute horrible POS to deal with.
Yeah.
Period.
Yep.
That's it. It's happened to every single one of us. Some more than others, but it has happened to every single one of us.
I will say, as a
Go to
forward
LAN.
defense, I was raised correctly. I've only ever called people idiots. I've never gone much further. All right, I'm clean.
Well, that's good. I'm sure, but still had the crash out and gotten toxic and mad at people in the game or called them idiots.
Oh, sure.
Right? Like,
yeah, no, I've
that's
definitely
what I'm
gone
saying.
full
Everybody
on
has,
that many times.
right. It's a spectrum of negativity, but everybody has been on that spectrum of negativity at some point. Go to a LAN though, and you see the camaraderie and the community that's built into this game, like, and why we love it so much. Every single person is there for a shared passion, and that's what LAN centers can do again. Because, well, going to like a Counter-Strike LAN is great because you're with a bunch of Counter-Strikers. The LAN center is great because you're with a bunch of gamers,
Yeah,
and it's
having
mostly
fun.
people that are gonna like, yeah, just having fun, and you're gonna go like see a game that maybe you don't normally play, and you're gonna like take a beat from your game, and you're going to meet some people you don't normally meet, or like whatever, or you're going to be, and it's a lot easier to like take somebody who doesn't know how to play a game and teach them when they're sitting next to you and you're able to help them out in person than trying to pug with them online and, okay, let me try to coach you while we're also trying to win this game that's matched us up against people that are way above your skill
Yeah,
level, like
yeah. No,
land centers just build the
it
community.
does, and that's kind of another thing. This is not even really a Counter-Strike issue. This is a cultural issue. One of the biggest issues we're facing in America as a culture is like the death of the third place. People don't go to, even like they don't go to bars, they don't go to parks, they don't go to, like the community rec center, the YMCA, stuff like that. It just doesn't exist. Like I know for me, I only graduated high school, 8 years ago or so, 2017, however far back to this. Math is hard. That's why I haven't gone back to college. But when I was in high school, I went every day afterwards. There was a little skate park community center right in front of my high school. You went inside, they had a pool table, they had a TV and an Xbox and a PlayStation. They would sell, like soda and drinks and stuff. And I would hang out there for like an hour and a half before my dad would pick me up because he would work later than my school would get out. So like having those places to go, just in general, outside of gaming, Counter Strike, whatever, in life, is just an important part of being able to function as a human. We don't have those community interactions nearly as much anymore. We don't hang out with our neighbors. Our kids don't play outside nearly as much. That's a big issue with kind of the thing that's like slowly decaying us on just like a human level, is that we're more isolated than ever. And that does actually affect Counter-Strike. That you can bring that back to affect this game we're talking about, but it affects life too. So those land centers could be a big step just for people to be able to grow as people.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter what your political beliefs are. One of the big cultural shifts in America, and I think a lot across the world in general, and why it feels like such a weird, crazy time, is we've never been so connected yet so isolated
Yes,
from each other, right?
absolutely.
Like, and it's this very bizarre duality that we're all experiencing on a daily basis. And yeah, I think about it all the time. Like I'm talking to people and my friends all of the time during the day. I don't think there's a moment in time. It's like rare during the day when I'm just quietly sitting by myself and playing a video game, right? Like I'm talking to somebody in Discord, I'm having a meeting, I'm talking calling my parents, I'm calling friends from back home, right? But ultimately I interact with other humans on other than when I go to LAN every few months, I just don't interact with
It's
humans, and
very
it's very
infrequent.
lonely
Yeah,
at times.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's incredibly lonely, and it's a weird, like I said, it is a weird duality, and I know I'm not alone in experiencing that, and that's why I feel like going to the land center is so important. I need to go to my local land
Yeah,
center more often. My problem is a little bit laziness.
that's
So
true. I can speak to that as
I
well.
will pull admission to that, but like uh I have one local land center, and it's kind of a weird, sketchy place that's no one's ever at, but maybe I need to go like start a
There
party
is
down there. I don't
a
know.
bigger
It's
issue of apathy for sure. I mean, I know that I can speak to that as well. I'm a young man. I'm 26 years old. I work from home. I live with my parents, out of convenience, but also out of necessity. I can't afford to live on my own like many people. And, I work from home and I do this. So I wake up, I look at the news, I look at HLTV, I check my Discord, I make a video if a video needs to be done, and then what? Right? I walk my dogs, I clean my house, I do whatever, but like yeah, there is a social isolation that is becoming a bigger and bigger issue, and I like to look at kind of try to look at as much hope as I can as the world crumbles around us. But the Austin Major, I think, was probably the most heartwarming thing to hear from that was all the interviews they did where people were like, "Yeah, I met people I've been friends with for years for the first time, and we're here watching Counter Strike." Like that is a very humanizing moment. That like this is a video game. That guy just called me the N word for missing a smoke, but also I just went and met people I've never met before at a LAN center or at a giant arena with 15,000 people watching people play video games. That is amazing, like culturally, that can happen, and that Counter Strike is big enough to facilitate that. So hopefully, at the end of it, if there is like a hope on the horizon, is that the Austin Major probably brought a lot of people who were casual further into the fold in such a way that the NA revival can kind of begin more in earnest.
I think so. I like seeing that Complexity immediately is like, hey, we're getting our revival NA revival cup going again. I think there were some people that were like, hey guys, you need to like be pushing that like on a monthly basis at the very least. Like you're gonna get NA revived, you need to like be investing back into the scene.
Mhm.
It's always nice seeing Jason Lake move around. I think that seeing all five of the like potential NA like teams that were there that could like do anything just kind of fail out miserably. It was, well, at least like M80 and Complexity and um Liquid. Like and I'm gonna say something wild. I don't think Liquid is okay, Garcon, you're getting a little close there, buddy. Move. Move. I don't think Liquid is NA.
Well,
I'm just it's a German organization. I know that their team has been rooted in NA for 10 plus years now, 11
mhm.
years. But Team Liquid is a German organization with, I think, three players that are European now. That
Yeah, so by VRS, they
and
are
it's
EU now. They literally can't be an
right,
NA
and now
team.
they are
Yeah, so
EU.
whether you want to
But like
argue it or
I have
not, they're
seen
not. And they're probably getting rid of NAF, so they're even less NA.
right, exactly. So like I think this idea that Liquid is an NA team has got to be tossed out the window. Like, well, we have Liquid. No, once Cloud9 left, that was kind of it. Complexity was who we had, and they stepped up a bit, but Evil Geniuses exited the scene. Uh, who else? You know, nobody wants to be in Counter Strike, and you've got all these very small orgs that are trying to build names for themselves in advanced and main and ECL, but it all comes down to the fact that there's just no money in the system, so it's like a gamble for people to be invested in this
Yeah,
thing, right?
and
Like
not
that's
everyone's like Jason Lake and just willing to kind of psychotically support it no matter what. Like, we
right,
don't have
right,
Optic or 100 Thieves because they don't see the value as a business, and that's understandable.
right.
But part of me is like, dude, Hex, you love North American esports. I kind of wish you would just like, as much as you could be like, fuck it, the money's not the problem here. It's North America is the problem. But when you're running a business, you just can't necessarily always make those kinds of calls. So I don't know if the money situation could be easily fixed. The buyouts are only getting more expensive. The salaries are only going up. The salaries are already higher in America as a rule because our cost of living is so much different. And then players want more money. They just constantly want more money, yet they deliver less and less for the orgs. You know, back in the day, 2014, 15, 16, players had streaming obligations in their contracts. Like you had to stream X amount of hours to help grow the brand. And now you don't see players like Twist or Leash firing up the stream every night because they can't. They don't have enough time. So there's even less visibility, even less growth available for the brands. So if you're an Optic, you're 100 Thieves, why do you want to come in to begin with? And you only really do it because you want to support the scene. But supporting the scene is great and all until you have to pay out paychecks.
Right. That's where everybody starts being like, "Oh, well," and I don't blame them. I'm not like mad at anybody. Like, oh, nobody's being stingy in our scene. It's we, like the only people that like have money in our scene are like kind of shady casinos.
Yep.
Unfortunately, like and it's sad because
You have to take gambling money. It's
as
literally
much as
unavoidable.
right, and that's something that I've learned. You know, you start out and like trying to engage in this space early on, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna do it without engaging in gambling and sponsor blah blah blah. Guess what? Everything in the scene that happens is from kind of awkwardly weird money. Like, and that's just how it is right
Mhm.
now. We can try to build towards something better in the future, but like it it's just it's just casino and gambling money right now, and that's even what a lot of the like EU is run off of, right? Like that's where a lot of their money is goes through, and
Yeah,
you know, it's not like they have just squeaky clean sponsors over there. It's all
it's not really going to change
uh,
anytime soon, unfortunately. It just is what it is. Like gambling is just a
Right.
vehicle for mass investment. Like I could tell you, this is something that I've grappled with even just personally on the level of a creator. Obviously I grew up, my big inspirations in terms of having a voice in Counter Strike were Richard Lewis and Thorn. I watched By the Numbers every time it came out. I watched all their videos, and so I like to think I have a pretty strong kind of moral compass when it comes to the gambling money. But here's the reality, right? I've worked with Skin Club, which is a gambling company, but I kind of drew the line at, well, Skin Club is just opening cases, and that's the same thing you could do in game. So if I'm advertising Counter Strike, am I not already advertising the same thing? Like if you want to make the moral hypocrisy call on that, I think that's absolutely valid. But I personally don't take casino money. If you have casino games on your website, I won't work with you. Like straight up, I've already denied those requests. So, but I have the opportunity as an independent creator to be that frugal. If you're a team and you're trying to pay 5 salaries and a coach and travel expenses, you you don't really have time to care about morals, which is really sad because I think that we should have a moral backbone about where we get our money from, but you also don't always get to make that call.
Right. Exactly. And you know, there's been periods of time where humans, it's just look at the Wild West back in the day. It was casinos ran so many different parts of these cities that were ungoverned and whatnot, and all the money went through the casino because gambling's addicting, and everybody does it at some level, and the house always wins. So, you have all this money kind of stacking up in these certain areas. And that's just one of those time periods that we're in right now. So we can either sit around and virtue signal to each other that, oh no, we can do better, or we can embrace the fact that that's the way it is right now, and work to do better, because that is what a lot of these people are doing. Hold these companies and sites accountable for what they're doing. Be vigilant about who you're signing up with before you just, okay, well, yeah, fine, I guess I'm fine with gambling, and then, okay, well, whoever hits me up first, I'll go with it. Do your due diligence like you're doing, right? Like that's what we all have to do, and slowly but surely continue to, like, make sure that these sponsorships are sequestered in a way that they're getting their advertising, they're doing what they need to do there, but that money is still supporting the scene. I talked to somebody recently about this, about the fact that, like, you don't have to be, like, fine with gambling, right? And into gambling when you do these things. It's you need to make sure that you're taking that money and doing something good with it. Like, we can siphon that money into good things is what I'm trying to get at. Like, we can siphon it off into helping out teams get to lands. We can siphon it off into making sure a good land is around, so that good teams are engaging with it and more teams are engaging with it, right? So there's ways to engage with these sponsorships without just taking that money and putting it in your pocket and like that.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I know I
And
keep asking
and
you if you
probably
know what I
probably
mean,
the
but
big impasse
I
that we're
think you
at,
do.
and we've been here for a while, is the relationship between the viewer and the game needs to change. If you're someone who is a fan and you turn up, you watch the game, support your team on social media and everything, that's great. But if you've never bought anything, if you've never bought merch, you never gone to an event or anything like that, that is probably the biggest gap. Is we have a community that doesn't want to pay for things, and that means we have to take more sponsorships in. One of the big things that could definitely help revive things is if we had tournaments that were pay per view. Like, I'm sorry, if there was a big tournament that featured the top 10 teams in the world and it was $5 to watch, like it was literally $5 to watch a day for IEM Cologne. You're telling me people wouldn't pay that? People would to get an online pass to watch it online, like no ads. You get the stream feed. People would absolutely do that, but fans keep pretending like they won't. But we're reaching an impasse where we can't keep just consuming hours and hours and hours of content for free with no kickback to the TOs, no kickback to the teams. The fans have to, at a certain point, do what we do with every other major sport, is that the fans have to pay for admission. And that's more than just like going to the physical event. We have to pay to be able to support the scene at a certain point.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I couldn't agree more, as a matter of fact, here, Jack. All right, well, I only have a couple more questions for you here because I think this has been a beautiful exchange of ideas and a good part one to hopefully many parts in the future of discussing the cultural needs and desires of our region.
Sure thing.
Uh, I got here's one question for you. Actually, let's break down. I got a few more than you think. So
Sure. Maybe what you
get
got?
break break down the major for me. Did you get a go? And like, what do you think's gonna happen with roster mania after that
So
whole
I didn't get a chance to go. It wasn't really in the cards for me to make the travel this time. Would have liked to, but this wasn't realistic for me to
feel
go.
that?
So I sat at home. I watched the whole thing. I made a video literally every day of the major, every stage. I covered every single game. As much as that ruined my sleep schedule for an entire month, but we made it happen. Coming out of the major, I think the big thing is we're in the arms race to catch Vitality. They are the everyone is chasing them. We haven't had a definitive number one team like this in over 5 years, where there is just a seismic gap between them and the rest. So how do we close the gap? How do we make Vitality look vulnerable? And we have a couple things going for us in that regard. One, Vitality, kind of unlike the Astralis era, while they're definitely a step ahead, there's not teams that haven't nipped at their heels. Whereas Astralis were famous for they would beat you on your own map pick at like 80% of the time. That doesn't happen. Vitality does lose maps, they just don't lose series. So how do we bridge that gap and win the second map and knock them out of a tournament? So obviously Falcons, they got in Kioske. My hot take about that is that I think that move will not age well for them, just because I don't think it makes sense structurally. And Kioske, he still has never played a tier one LAN. And Falcons need to be win now. They need to make a win now move. And I feel like they kind of made a move in reaction to like a name brand. Like they saw that Kioske was this highly talked about prospect, and they decided just to pick him up because of how much he's been talked about, more so than what he's actually done. I'm worried that Kiyose is going to hit tier one and probably be very good out the gate, but when he gets found out and he gets pre-gamed for in the following events, I think he'll struggle more than people are expecting.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's how I'm feeling about. I hadn't thought about that part with Kiyosike or Kyosuke, however you say his dang name on Falcons, but uh, yeah, I agree, and I think there's gonna be some. I just don't see anybody stopping Vitality. Like I think Vitality will maybe later on in the year, but I think Vitality are going to come back out of the gate swinging. They're feeling good. Maybe some kind of ego check, but I mean we saw how Apex leans into this like kind of big bad villainous role. He's loving every second of it, and with the team that he has behind him, like it's all an act. Obviously, he's a much more kind-hearted player behind uh off camera, but he's living up his best moment right now, and it actually reminds me a little bit of how JW was back in the day with Fnatic, because JW was kind of a bad boy of Counter Strike that didn't give a shit what anybody thought about him, and uh, you know it's working for them, and I don't think that Vitality are going to be figured out during this player break. In fact, I think roster shuffle is going to happen. They're going to stand strong, and they might actually move to that level of where Astralis was, where they've stuck together, everybody's shifted around them, and they continue to grow up while everybody kind of flounders around looking for their
Mm-hmm.
footing.
Yeah, I think if Vitality were going to get caught anywhere, the most complacent they would be is Cologne coming out of the player break, because you just won the major, you just capped it off, you had, the 4 week break. If there was any chance of them being cold, because, let's call it how it is. They were cold in one game in the major, and it was the first game after a 3 week break against Legacy. Yeah, it was best of one, but those first games coming back from an extended break are the best opportunities to jump on somebody and just kind of catch them unawares, right? So if Vitality were to have a tournament where they didn't win right now, I think Cologne is the most immediate opportunity. After that, I really don't know how they don't just make the minimum of grand finals in every single event they decide to go to. Like, and that would be honestly the expected outcome for most people. When it comes down to teams that I think can do it, I'm just gonna call it how it is. Mao's play Mals are in the exact same position that 2019 Team Liquid were. They play Vitality style with lesser names. You're not going to get over the fact that Robson Zywoo are, better than Torzi and Xerxin in every respect. Like, it's just you lack the top 5 best player in the world contender, star level power in that team to really contend with Vitality. So for me, I think Mals are off the list. I actually think out of all of the kind of the big 4 teams, people are going to underrate Spirit the most. And maybe this is a Donk bias on my part. Donk is the X factor to end all X factors. Donk will win a game by himself. And Zwei is a huge boost in their average level of firepower. I think Spirit have a much better chance than people are going to think to actually beat Vitality in a best of 3.
Yeah, I think that if this Zwei pickup is as good as we hope, Team Spirit are going to be the ones to knock off Vitality. I had talked to somebody about that yesterday. The Zwei pickup, if Don can have this pressure alleviated of having to be that, like, yes, Donk is that X factor right now that can just win games single-handedly, but that's not how you're going to win tournaments, right?
Mhm.
Like, you can't rely on a single player to just do that every single game, every map, right? And he's got Shiro there with him, but Shiro's a bit streaky, and the rest of them out there, Magic's Chopper, and I don't remember who the other one is, but
Zontex.
Zontix, that's right. Thank you. It's these guys are not picking up the slack that needs to be there. So if they can just introduce one more person that can alleviate that fragging pressure from Donk, Spirit will be potentially the team that actually hits that
Hmm.
big level and throws Vitality
Well,
off
I'm gonna hit you with
what they're
some
doing.
numbers here because I think this is the interesting part. Statsmeister on Twitter put this out a few days ago, and I used this in my video talking about Zwei. Spirit have the second best map win rate in the world this year. They are at 73% of their maps played, they are winning. Vitality is the only team above them at 80%. So Spirit are currently in a position where they only lose to Mouse, Falcons, or Vitality. Those are the only teams they are consistently losing to. They are beating every other team in the world consistently with ease. So Zwei just should make that even better. Like, they're already not losing to anybody else. So I'm not worried about them tripping up in a group stage. That's just never been where they've struggled. So they just needed that boost of consistency in a playoff environment. So if I'm Mouse or I'm Falcons, I'm already worried because we were already barely keeping ahead of these guys to begin with, and they just got stronger. So they should be more consistent in that regard. It just feels like Shiro to me is the 5th or 6th best player in the world this year. Like, you have Zywoo, Donk, Muncie are kind of like the consensus top 3, and then below them you have like Rops, and then like Nico and Shiro kind of occupy a similar space, and then you have players kind of stratifying down below that. So you have 2 of the best players in the world as your main core. You just need consistency behind that. So Zwei doesn't have to be a 1.7 player like he's been in Amiga. He just needs to be a positive anchor who isn't going to bleed and have point 0.8s in big games, which is what Magix and Chopper were doing on a consistent basis.
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to be an interesting second season of VRS here in the second half. We got all the switch ups with ESEA as well coming through. It's gonna be a lot of fun. All right, now I got my last two questions here for you, Lionheartz. One, where does your name Lionheartz come from?
Oh God! All right, I finally have to do this on camera. So a lot of people think there's like an English king who was named the Lionhearted. I think it was. I don't remember exactly who. Not where that name comes from. So I have to give myself 5 layers of defense ahead of this. I'm not a furry, not a furry. However,
Okay.
however, when I was younger,
However,
I read a series of books called Warriors. It was by Aaron Hunter, who's a YA fiction author. And what it was, these books should never have been in elementary school. They were extremely violent, and I read them when I was probably far. These were like teenage books. But basically, what it was is they were. It was like Game of Thrones, but all of the characters were anthropomorphized cats. That's the best way I can describe it. It was like these tribes of cats and like their warring society. Honestly, way better books than I could ever give it credit for. I loved reading them as a kid, and the main character for like the first arc of the series. The books are like 17 books long and like 3 different sub-series at this point. She is a prolific author.
Are they
The first main
are these the
character is
Redwall
Lionheart.
series?
I'm sorry, say again?
Are these the Redwall series you're talking
No,
about?
the series is called Warriors.
Warriors?
Yes, Warriors.
Dude.
I'm not even lying.
Sick.
They're actually really good books, and I haven't read them since I was younger.
You are lying. Don't say you're not.
No, that's true. Yeah, but yeah, so that
You're Lionheartz.
the main character in like the first 9 books is named Lionheart. That's where the name comes from. It's been my name for like the entirety of my time online, but so not anything to do with the English King. It is from a book. It is from a very well beloved book in the furry community. I'm not a furry. I'm just a fucking tourist. But the books I read when I was younger, and they stuck with me.
Oh, my dog's got something to say about it. Well, I like that. I appreciate you sharing that. All right, I got one last question here for you, and this is the same question I ask everybody. If you could talk to a younger version of yourself, like, 10, 11, 12, whatever, younger version of yourself, and give them some advice, what would it be? It can be Counter-Strike related or life related, but that's the last question I always ask. Give the next generation out there some advice.
Oh man, that's a difficult one. I guess the big thing for me is I was someone who I've always been a big guy. I was a huge fucking baby. I was literally 5 feet tall by the time I was in first grade. So I've always been just a big, large individual my entire life. And I think that the one thing I would tell younger me is to just care less what other people think. I've always been a very emotional person, and I dealt with a lot of pretty bad bullying when I was younger, and I allowed a lot of that to just kind of hang with me far too long into my life. A lot of self-anxiety, a lot of self-image issues, and a lot of that I still deal with to some degree today. And I think the big thing is don't let what other people think about you define how you think about you. Like, your own self-image is your own, and you should not allow what other people say about it to dictate how you view yourself, because what they say doesn't ultimately matter. You should be comfortable with who you are and confident in who you are, and that will allow the good aspects of your personality to shine through in a way to the people that will care to listen. Because in reality, I don't think I've ever had a problem making friends and making connections with people. I refuse to open myself up in that way. So it's just have a little more self-confidence and just be able to tone out what other people are saying.
I think that's brilliant advice, Jack. Thank you very much for sharing that. I think we can all take a lesson in that. All right, well, dude, I appreciate you coming through and come and having a yap sesh with me. Do you want to do a little shout out, give some plugs, let them know where people can find you? We'll link it in the bio as well, but let them know while they're listening.
Absolutely. You can find me over on YouTube at Lionheartz CS2. You can follow me on Twitter at Lionheartz1337. You can follow me on Twitch at Lionheartz CS2 as well. If you guys don't know who I am, I usually do recaps of all the biggest tournaments in the world. So there's a big event going on and the day's over and you're wondering about the 5 matches you missed. You can go over to my channel some amount of time after it's done, as long as everything's going right. You can find a recap of what happened throughout the day. I do podcasts occasionally. I do a lot of news-related content as well. And then overall, if there's pro games going on, I'm there talking about it. And you're probably going to be mad at my takes, but I don't really hold back in that regard. You guys can find me there. Thank you, Big D. It's been awesome to sit down, lay it down with you one time. Sure, we'll be back again. There's a lot more to talk about. And hopefully NA Counter-Strike can get back to where it needs to be in these next couple of years.
That's what we're hoping for. We're pushing for it. Grassroots movements happen everywhere. All right. Thank you for watching. We'll see you later.
Later.
Whoop.